Okay, we're live. Phil, how are you doing?
Good. How have you been, Carson?
I've been good, been good. I kind of took like almost a month ish off. I've been doing talks here and there, but I was doing like three a day, and it just became at some point slightly overwhelming. And luckily, I had a lot of material recorded that I could I recorded myself for a couple hours answering questions, and then I snipped all those so each day I could put up a video of an answer of a question. But really, I was trying to take about a month of just like I need to I need to relax and get my brain back together.
I
Um,
don't blame you. Three different people a day, like each conversation, like what, like an hour on average?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, no, it's been fun. I'm doing a bunch of writing right now. That's that's probably actually my main thing I wish I could figure out the timing for is every time I talk to somebody about a topic, I want to sit down and write those ideas down. And I think I talk to people more than I write, and I wish I could even that out.
hmm
Um, but uh, but I have a 7 year old, and so my 13 year old's never around. He's always off playing with his friends. But like the cherishing the family time. Once all the kids are out of the house, I'll just be spending all my time writing. but
I would imagine that AI is already prepared to be an editor, to act as an editor for you.
mm,
Is that true? I haven't looked into it, but
I'm not sure, but that sounds like a thing. It sounds like a thing I would want to stay far away from. But I
okay.
also like it. Like I mean, I definitely there'll be a word or two that I spell wrong, and I'll be like, "Oh, good to know, computer. Thank you."
hmm
And sometimes the computer like will recommend a structure of words, and so yeah, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's I like the idea of maybe some kind of a system being able to read your mind. So you know how you can do voice to text, and you can just like
Yep.
instead of trying to type it all up, you could just be driving and voice to text your thoughts, and then eventually edit those yourself.
hmm
It'd be cool if well, it'll probably never be able to read your mind, but I feel like sometimes I'm thinking and my ideas I'm thinking I wish were just typed up, and but then when I go to like do voice to text, my brain freezes up. So.
Well, I mean, I think that it can read your mind a little bit. That's sort of where it's already, that was one of the earliest things I feel like it was doing, and that's why people are like, I was looking up, this other thing, and then this other thing that I never even asked the cell phone about. It gave me an ad for this, and I never typed it in, I never said anything.
Mm.
And that's because sort of like the using your cookies, using your digital trail, you sort of analyzed it and thought, okay, people who do this, here's the pattern of behavior, this is the next thing
Mm.
they're going to think, this is the next thing they're going to look for, and then it sends you
Gotcha.
that ad and you didn't even say anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's wild. But yeah, let's
It's
hop into. Oh, you're fine. Let's hop into assisted suicide. So, what's your basic thoughts as of right now?
like, as you know, I'm Christian, but I'm not doctrinaire or anything like that about it. I think that a lot of the sort of like really extreme, like no, 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 um, can't ever kill anyone for any reason, has come across. It seems like that's not a part of Christian history. It seems like that to me, and I could be wrong about this, that's something that has come into favor, as a way to not seem like a hypocrite when it comes to being pro-life. But
Mm.
I'm not afraid of like appearing as a hypocrite as long as I'm actually not one.
For sure.
So my opinion about assisted suicide is that, if someone is terminal, if they're in extraordinary pain, there's nothing anyone can do to help them. Then yeah, mercy killing is a thing, and
Mm.
it's called mercy killing for a reason. And that's how I see assisted suicide, as a form of mercy killing. I don't see it as a kind of libertarian ultra. Everybody can just do what they want. You can't tell me what to do with my body. I can kill myself if I want to. No, no, no.
Mm.
Because if you want to kill yourself because you're sad, right? You want to kill yourself for a reason that doesn't make sense to a rational person thinking rationally, right? Then that's not something you can consent to. You're not thinking correctly.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. I think I take it a little further than you. I think maybe more the thing that you were just describing there, where I think anybody should be able to decide things for themselves. But I also think that maybe we should have areas where we're cautious for making sure people are thinking rationally.
Hmm.
And I don't know to what degree. So one thing I would compare this to, because I wrote a few notes down, and one thing is deciding the age for it. And I guess you wouldn't have necessarily an age limit if you're going off of terminal illness. Where for me, I like to compare it to my thoughts on like trans surgeries. I have many thoughts about what we should or should not be able to do when it comes to kids. But when people are adults, I like to leave them to their own choices. And so, in a sense, I think an adult, once you hit 18, if you want to do something that you might regret, have a surgery that can exist, and you're an adult that can choose to have it. I like to think that you should be able to do this thing, and so I guess in a sense I feel the same way with the assisted suicide thing. Um, it would just come down to regulations, like what regulations. Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think. Okay, I want to break down the last thing you said. If somebody didn't have a terminal illness, but they wanted to die, they've attempted suicide a few times, but they just weren't successful at it. They couldn't figure out a good way to do it, but they
Hmm.
wanted to die and they would love for somebody to press a button or inject them with a thing. And then you want to get them help. How long of trying to get them help to make sure that to try to get them to a rational state would it take before you might say, even without a terminal illness, you've been wanting this for 20 years, you still want it, your mind hasn't changed, you've seen every psychiatrist? Is there a limit that would change your mind on that one?
I don't immediately believe that there is a limit. The analogy that immediately comes to mind would be like cancer, because cancer is an illness. Wanting to kill yourself for reasons that a normal, rational human being would not consider reasons to kill yourself, that's a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you die from that mental illness, that's tragic. And if you live with it for a long time, hopefully there's not a point at which people are saying, "Oh, well, I mean, even though you're not dead, let's kill you anyway because you seem to have had cancer for a while." Um, so it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
strike me as a reason to kill someone. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Do you think it should be illegal to kill yourself?
Um, I mean, I suppose technically yes, because that way this gets into sort of like how do you treat drugs too? Do you treat drugs as like a health
Mm-hmm.
issue or do you treat them as a criminal issue? As long as we don't have this like two-tiered system where there are people who are sick, who want to kill themselves, who destroy their own bodies with drugs, then yeah, in essence, suicide must be banned. I'm not sure that that it isn't necessary. In other words, I think it is necessary to treat suicide a little differently. And drugs are
Mm-hmm.
sort of the same way. It's like a disease. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm trying to imagine like so if somebody was going to kill themselves, let's just go with like jumping off a bridge. If
Okay.
somebody went to jump off a bridge and then a police officer saw it and was able to get close enough, and then they save them, and then we go to get them help. We take them to a place. They see a psychiatrist. This whole thing, and then 6 months later they go to do it again. And the same police officer's there. He could even call it in and say, "Hey, it's the same guy. He's still trying to do this." And then he saves him. And let's just say this happens every 6 months for like 10 years. Um, would part of the law be that if somebody so much cannot kill themselves, even that once we think that they are likely to achieve it, if somebody isn't there to stop them, that they would be put into like a mental facility?
Um,
Or is it just stop it if we happen to catch it?
You definitely want to stop it if you happen to catch it. How it's how it's treated as a social issue and how it's addressed, um, I don't know. I could shoot from the hip on that. Maybe there should be sort of like rehabilitation centers. You're off on a farm and you learn to just enjoy life and the small things. But that's me sort of like shooting from the hip. I don't
Hmm.
I don't know the best way to shock people out of wanting to kill themselves if there isn't a good reason for them wanting to kill themselves. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think collectively, and especially with professionals, we should figure out every possible option and try to work with those things. I think a lot of people like to dismiss the idea that if somebody is depressed and they're like on antidepressants, that somebody like myself might say, if you haven't tried going into nature and spending time with nature, getting exercise, there's a lot of different things that aren't medicine that can help with these issues. And I think every time we discover those things, that's a thing that we should help somebody with. If somebody's depressed, wanting to kill themselves, and we want to help make sure that they are truly deciding that, then I think any of those things are good. And if those things don't work, or even aside from those things, I'm not against medications. I'm not against
mhm.
trying antidepressants, and I don't know enough about them to judge them too
Yeah.
harshly. But what one thing that's interesting is if so I don't view it as something that should be illegal, but I'm trying to get in the mindset of viewing things as illegal. If somebody stabs somebody, it's illegal. They go to jail. They're in trouble for a certain amount of time. Maybe they're in jail for 6 months or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know what happens when you do something illegal that makes you likely to do it again, like that. So if you stab another person, do they say, "Oh,
Mhm.
well, it's not 6 months in jail for stabbing; it's 6 months in jail for a first offense"? If you are likely a person that in our society are going to stab innocent citizens,
Mhm.
we need to have our law protect people. So now you're in here for 2 years, and then if
Mhm.
somebody gets out and stabs somebody again, so if we view harming others as something that's illegal and we're going to adjust based off how it's happening to stop it, would we view the same thing with somebody only wanting to harm themselves? If we stop them and we get them help, and then that help doesn't help, and then they go to harm themselves again, are we viewing this as a crime that we say we want to protect our citizens, even the ones that we want to protect from themselves? And
Yeah.
so, since they tried to harm themselves twice, we are going to force them into this living facility where there's no knives, and the rest of their lives they might have to hang out in this facility if they attempted it like 10 times or something.
Yeah, I think you're right, and sort of what you draw light on, what you're casting light on here is that we should not lose sight of the goal. Why don't we want people to kill themselves? Is it because we're just incessant rule followers and we say, well, we made it illegal, so now we have to lock you in chains for the rest of your life so that you have to stay alive? Like the goal is we want them to not want to kill themselves, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to have suicide as a crime as opposed to a health issue, then we have to, we have to be willing to say we can't lower someone's standard of living to the point where they're only going to want to die more anyway. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
see it as the same sort of crime. And you're right. If you have a guy who stabs a random stranger, it doesn't have to be completely motiveless. Like the stranger might have a wallet that he wants, a watch that he wants, but
Mm-hmm.
he's willing to stab the stranger and take. Did
Oh, you cut
I
out.
lose you?
Yeah, you cut out for a second, but you're back.
Okay, so the sort of person who would commit that kind of random crime against a stranger, even if they have a motive, right, a selfish motive, they have to be put away and kept away from other people long enough so that they're a completely different human being when they come out. Often they have to be put away until they're an old man and they're not as much of a threat to anyone else.
Mm.
Whereas someone who tries to kill themselves, like their victim is themselves. So these really gratuitous punishments don't make sense in that case.
Mm.
The point is to try to get them to where they want to live. So I agree that it's not the same sort of crime. Or killing yourself is a different thing than versus being a harm to someone else.
Gotcha. Okay, because yeah, the other situation would be somebody depriving somebody of their negative rights, and in this case, it wouldn't be a negative rights situation because you can't really take your own negative rights.
I,
So in this case, it would just be a separate element of wanting to help our citizens in our society.
I just want to highlight real quick that, like, from my point of view, it's not really like a rights situation. It's only the consequences. So, so that's just philosophically a little bit of a difference I feel between us.
Hmm.
So for me, there's just not. We ask ourselves, wait, what's the consequence of us putting away someone who's trying to kill themselves the same way we would put away somebody who attacks a random stranger? Now,
Hmm.
let's say you have a crime of passion or domestic violence. You don't necessarily have to put that person away for as long as the person who attacked a random stranger, because they might have lived an entirely different life. They might know different people. There's a normal person can commit a horrendous crime given the right circumstances. A
Hmm.
normal person with a normal level of empathy cannot attack a random stranger for their money, right? Maybe if
Hmm.
they're starving, they can attack them for the bread they're holding, but not for, not just because they want their wallet. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah. 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 No, I like that. That's good. Okay. Something you said reminded me of this situation. So there's a little bit of a story that goes to it. I watched this thing where this guy killed somebody. He whatever reason he got like 20 years in jail for it. While he was in jail, he blinded, and at least in one eye, a prison guard,
Hmm.
and it is horrible. Like anyways. Um, but this
Yeah,
guy actually,
they'll put glass and feces in a thing and throw it at somebody's eyes. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And that happening is, and that idea is one of the only things that gets in the way of my anti-death penalty. I'm very against death penalty. I don't think our government should have any say on somebody's death or ending somebody's life. I think they should just be able to um, prevent people from doing these harms by holding them in this building. But the thing that gets in the way is this idea that should there be citizens that are having a job that could put them at risk.
Hmm.
And so, anyways, what made me think of the suicide version of that is this show One Tree Hill. It's horrible. Don't watch it. But this girl was, she was like 25, very depressed, and I think her mom died or something. Anyways, this character, whenever she'd get depressed, she would go on this main street where there are a lot of cross streets and cars going like crazy, and she would close her eyes and just start driving fast in a straight line, hoping that she would get hit and die. And everybody I knew that watched this show thought this was a powerful thing. And my brain just instantly in 5 seconds goes, she's risking killing all these people that she might run into.
Yeah,
And
that's what I would think of everybody else. Yeah,
right, no, but everybody else is like, oh, it's so sad that she wants to kill herself, and oh, I hope she makes it. And
just to clarify, she's a pretty young girl, right?
correct, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought so.
um, and I was just thinking, like, this is horrible. So this kind of reminded me of the idea that, like, the bad thing about not having the death penalty, where innocent people could get hurt, like a prison guard.
Yeah.
I don't know how many suicides lead to possible harming of other people. If somebody jumps off a building and hits somebody, like in the movie Amelie, or this car situation. I don't know if this is an excuse to care less about the person committing suicide, but I can't think of anything more devastating than the idea of somebody dying because of somebody else wanting to die, not just getting an easier way out. So, like,
Hmm.
if hypothetically offering assisted suicide saved 100 innocent people a year that died from the suicidal person getting in a car wreck or Anyways, let's say it was 100 people a year. Would it be worth it then, if we saw the numbers and could press a button? And how 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 many people that, because of what they're dealing with in that moment, that could be talked out of suicide and go on to have a great life? How many of those people would it take to offset it? Would you, if 1,000 people could be talked out of suicide and go on to have a great life, would that make up for 100 innocent dying, or how do you do the math there?
Um, I don't know where the threshold would be for me of like,
Mhm.
but obviously if we make suicide super easy for everyone, then it must be the case that some people who would be harmed in suicide attempts or successful attempts to suicide would otherwise be saved. Okay, that must be the
Mhm.
case, that some innocent third parties, because someone else wants to kill themselves and goes closes their eyes and goes driving on the wrong way of the road, um, they end up killing other people. Or, a lot of people commit suicide by cop and then someone might be killed in the crossfire. I've seen cases where I think people are committing suicide by cop, but they're firing at the police with real bullets, so they're actually
Mm.
harming the police. Like they put themselves in circumstances where, they're not even, they're the one who's just losing it and deciding they're going to kill themselves in a gunfight.
Mm.
So it has to be the case that you're saving innocent people by allowing suicide. That logic, I think, can be taken to a repugnant conclusion if you're not looking at the numbers. I don't know what the final number would be. Like I don't know where. Okay,
Mhm.
here's the threshold where I'd say, Carson, you're right. In order to save innocent bystanders, we should we should change the law and just allow suicide booths or whatever.
Mhm.
Or I'm not trying to straw man you. I'm sure you don't want suicide
Yeah.
booths. You want some like
No. Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
some guardrails there. But
But I would accept a
yeah.
suicide booth, for a human that was going to harm another. I mean, we can't know that kind of thing, but if there was a human that wanted to kill themselves, that outside of that day would have the greatest life and go on to live perfectly whatever, um, if there was two of them, and those two dying meant an innocent person died, versus letting that innocent person die and those two go on to live a great life, I feel like, I would easily save the innocent person that did nothing wrong, in that one to
Mm.
two situation. I might do it even if it was like 1,000 to one. Um, but at the same time, aside from that, setting that aside, I would love to help people. I always, whenever I think of somebody in a bad situation, I think of homeless people. I think of people that are on drugs, and I think of people that like have like some schizophrenia and some various different things. I instantly imagine, what if that was my daughter?
Mm.
And then that just makes me go, okay, I feel for everybody.
Mhm.
When I see a crazy person on the street, my thought isn't, we need to clean this up. I mean, we do in a sense, but my instant thought is, this kid that I would do anything for could be in that situation. So
Mhm.
same thing where, if my kid got in a situation where she wanted to kill herself, but with the right treatment and the right getting help, she would go on to have the greatest life, and I could spend time with her and hang out with the grandkids if she has kids. It makes me want to fight for this situation anytime I put her in a situation like this. But I wouldn't want an innocent person to die because of her choices, and I
Mm.
care that selfishly, knowing it's her, I'd care more about her than the innocent person. I'll take out 1,000 innocent people, but separately, um, I have this problem with innocence. I have this idea that if somebody was going to be sentenced to death, getting the death penalty, and they were innocent, I would rather them go free and 100 guilty people than to take out the right 100 guilty people and this one innocent person. I'm very There's something about,
Mhm.
being supportive of an action that can harm innocence.
So let me ask you this, because I agree with the instinct that you have. And as an aside, I love that sort of like Rawlsian um, empathy pump that you're coming up with, where you picture other people as like, what if it's your daughter? And as a new
Mm-hmm.
parent, that's like a good toolkit to have. It's a good tool to have in your toolkit. But let
Mm-hmm.
me ask you this then. So it's better to let one innocent person walk free, right? Even if 100 guilty people are going to walk free as well, rather than have those 100 people caught and executed and also accidentally execute the innocent person. But what about the consequences after that? Right. So now
Mhm.
those 100 murderers are back on the street, and many, many innocent people are murdered and harmed after that. I don't know if in
Yeah.
YouTube we can even say grape, but
Yeah.
like,
I had a video removed and got a warning because of the C word with the number that comes after 18 being talked about. And
oh,
so I think I'm going to stay away from that topic and what you just said. I don't know the best approach. Maybe as of now, we'll just say sexual assault. And but then we'd have to specify. But anyways, I'm not too worried about it, but that did just happen. Um, but yeah, so here's the thing. The reason why a police officer shooting an innocent person is worse than a citizen shooting 100 innocent people
mhm,
is because the people that are supposed to protect us, the people that make this it worth having in society, matter so much more if they do a wrong thing.
mhm,
Um, and so the state deciding to kill a person and it turns out they're innocent, I
mhm,
think is worse than, say, calling in a court case like it seeming clear somebody did something like OJ, but if there's the right amount of reasonable doubt, we let them go, and then they go on to harm somebody else. I think that's slightly less bad.
mhm.
But no, you're right. The way it would pan out, and especially if we looked at the numbers of a hypothetical of how it pans out, not executing an innocent person probably wouldn't be a better outcome than what would happen if the 100 of the worst prisoners were released or something.
Mhm.
So it's probably best to alter what I said to remove the death penalty so this innocent person doesn't die, even if it means these 100 guilty people are going to have life in jail instead of die because the possible of innocence. Um, but I, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would sacrifice somebody's innocence. So let's say I had six people in front of me. One of them I knew was innocent, and the other five I knew were guilty. And I was told I had to choose if all of them go to jail for life or if all of them go free. I don't feel like my choice would be to let all of them go free. I think it would be. And I don't feel like letting all of them go free necessarily puts it on my decision what those five do. Um, if those five end up leading to two deaths where I prevented this one person from going to jail for life, I think it's almost a better outcome in the sense that that one would be an action forcing this bad thing to happen, but one's letting a possibility of bad outcomes happen. And that's kind of where I'm at now. What would you, if you had five people in front of you, would you rather send an innocent person to jail for life, or would you rather risk maybe some of the five bad would harm others that you don't know?
Well, I thought, let me say, because let me sort of respond to your whole comment.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was about to disagree with you until you sort of narrowed in on your last example there with letting five people go. Because I'm coming from the point of view of being a consequentialist, but being a deep consequentialist. So it's not just, oh, let's optimize the outcome right now for what's obviously leading to a better outcome. It's also, what kind of society would you live in if you make this decision, right?
Mm,
And how would other people in the society react to the decision? How would they feel about you being willing to sacrifice one innocent individual to make sure that these five are kept in prison, right?
mm-hmm.
All of the consequences have to be taken into account, and all of the reverberating consequences of those consequences as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I do agree with you. It's important to avoid hurting the innocent. It's just that when the numbers get extreme, like the 100 to 1 example, that's
Mm-hmm.
when it's more like, okay, obviously, at this point, we have to keep the 100 murderers in jail. Whereas when you
Mm-hmm.
bring it down to like numbers that are more manageable, like, oh, would you let these 5 people go? And it's actually just a risk that they're going to reoffend
Mm-hmm.
versus like they're on a mission, like they're going to go harm these people. That's when it gets more in the blurry area, and it's more like, okay, this makes sense. Let's spare our innocent person. So it's about the consequences, but not just the direct ones. It's about the deep consequences and how people react to your decisions. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I'm trying to think of what led to that that we were talking about with the assisted suicide element.
Oh yeah, I think it was. Oh yeah, it was actually had to do with the example you brought up in the TV show, where this woman decides she's going to sort of completely recklessly
Mhm.
endanger everyone else's life by driving with her eyes closed.
Oh yes, yes, yes. That's right. Because even though I'd want to help people, I'd feel that their actions that could harm somebody might overpower the wanting to help. Um, Yeah, yeah, it's complicated, and it's probably something like driving, where we have to look at this thing. Okay, we have this great invention. It's going to be so great for so many reasons: travel, work, but especially having vehicles that can take people, like an ambulance that can take people to help them.
Mhm.
Driving is good, and so we look at the amount of deaths that come from driving, and we go, okay, we're gonna have this thing exist that there will be some good and some bad, and so
Mhm.
the same thing is probably best for the suicide situation, where we don't want to make it easy like a suicide booth just to save all the innocent bystanders that could die from like the driving thing we're talking about. And so there has to be some kind of middle ground where we would want to offer it to some people, like the terminally ill, that we would view as a good reason, and then offering it to them would make them less likely to do the driving through traffic thing. Um, Okay, well, let me ask you one that I guess it could feel emotionally loaded, but I don't think it necessarily is. How do you feel about prisoners getting that option? Like, so I'm against the death penalty. I like the idea of, I'm against the idea of the government deciding who dies. But separate from that, I like the idea of even the worst human on earth, which again, I could imagine my daughter could be someday. I would go visit her. I wouldn't
Mhm.
care what crime she did. I wouldn't. I might agree with the state that she should be in jail for life if she killed like a 500 innocent 5-year-olds. But
Mhm.
I would go visit her. I would have those memories. I would go and visit her, and I would talk to her, and hopefully would never talk about the bad things. I would just and I would love to hold her.
Mhm.
Um, and so for the idea of family members being able to see people that are in jail for life, I'm against people. I'm against the government killing people. But what do you think if the government said you're in jail for life? Um, if you want, we can give you an injection and you'll die. Assisted suicide for people in jail.
It's interesting that I had brought up this deep consequentialist idea because I um, provided provided that there's no sort of um, that everything else is working perfectly. We're not putting innocent people in jail. Provided all of that, that does seem to make sense, right? Because, like you're talking about, this prisoner who blinded someone else, if they're in any way a danger to other people, and the whole point of getting people to not kill themselves, for me, is so that they are both happy, hopefully, for the rest of their lives. They learn to not want to kill themselves, and that they're productive. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very likely that being in jail for the rest of your life is like a terminal illness. That's it, you know. So philosophically, I can see where that would be okay. The only thing I would stop is, and I remember in our some of our previous conversations, I brought this up. I take into account the way the rest of society perceives it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it would be a very popular opinion that this would be horrible and exploitative, and just there would be an absolute outcry and rage at the idea that you would ever offer a prisoner assisted suicide when they're kept in custody in that situation, right? There would be such offense taken to that that
Mm.
that I think it would actually undermine some of society's stability in ways that would be totally unnecessary, especially for how few cases we would be talking about. And what is it? All we have to do is feed them forever. Not a huge deal, right? We live in an age of plenty. So
Mm. I wonder in the U.S. Let's see. I'm going to see how many people are in jail for life. I guess it's prison, not jail.
yeah.
Prison lives.
And you have to remember, life is not always life, right? It's like, oh, you're sentenced to life, but then it's like, oh, you're out after 20 years on parole.
Gotcha. Let's see. In the United States, more than 200,000 people are serving life sentences. 1 out of every 7 in prison. What does that mean?
Out of 7 prisoners in prison, one of them is there for life.
Okay. Oh, I see. But that total is 200,000. Okay, I see.
A quick note
Um,
in that, just a quick pin in that number.
mhm.
That number might seem a little skewed. That doesn't mean that 1 out of every 7 people sentenced is there for life, because
Yeah.
the rest of the population is turning over. They're not.
The rest of the population is turning over and they're not. Can you explain that? What?
So turnover, like you would for if I work in a company and
Mhm.
one person works there for his entire life, and you say, oh, okay, 1 out of 20 people in this company, like at this moment, are here for the rest of their lives. Yeah, but the other 19 are turnover. So he's going to end up
Mm.
seeing in his life while he's working at that company like 1,000 other people, not those other 19,
Oh,
because
I see.
they're serving 1 year and leaving. Usually, have to be sentenced a full year before you go to prison. If it's less than that, it's like jail, at least in New York State.
Yeah.
So it's people serving 5-year sentences, 10-year sentences, and they're all turning over. They're coming in and leaving. Whereas, like at any given point, those 1 people out of 7 are there for the whole time.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. What? Okay. Let's move it over to a. So you're against the prison one.
Um, I think I'm against the prison one, but I am convincible on it. If
Okay.
everyone else seems to be okay with it.
My only problem with the prison one whatsoever would be that if there was some feeling of obligation, if there's a feeling of like pressure to the prisoner, or if it could be done, and we found out that there was corruption where somebody's killing a prisoner and then saying, oh, they wanted this. The detail on how many different doctors and maybe witnesses to witness the approval, the verbal approval, and the written approval of the person saying they want to die. Like, in a sense, I'm in favor of that for anybody of any adult age with the right amount of seeking treatment. But I'm definitely in favor of it if there's no corruption. For anybody that chooses to do it that is in jail for life, I would just say that in jail for life, but definitely without the possibility of parole. Because if somebody's in jail wrongfully accused, and people get found wrongfully accused all the time and get released after spending 20 years or whatever, I like to hope that they would go, no, I don't want that. And then they don't get it. And then hopefully their thing is overturned. But somebody else that, since I'm against the death penalty, if somebody killed like 10 innocent people, they're in jail for life, there's no parole, they know they're in there for life. If they like their life in there and they have options to read books and they just want to live their life out and write stuff down, then that's great. But if they say, no, like, this life isn't for me, I have issues that led to me to do this horrible thing, or like pedophiles maybe, like they don't want to feel the way they feel, but they feel it and they can never have a normal life and they would rather just not exist. Yeah, I'm in favor of it. I just don't know to what degree, because I think the ultimate thing that we need a government for is protecting us from being killed. So there would have to be so many levels of making sure that this never happens as a form of somebody that doesn't want to be killed being killed.
Mhm.
So I don't know what that answer is, but it's probably more so than what currently goes on with assisted suicide. But I don't know to like what extreme. I don't think there needs to be 1,000 people that hear the person say I want to. I don't know if it needs to be a video thing where the person on video is declaring that they want this thing. Um,
If if it's implemented, more or less the way that you're saying, and it seems to be working okay within the prisons, but it becomes an extremely contentious social justice issue outside of the prisons, where actually like riots are starting, and this is seen as another way of exterminating human beings, especially because so disproportionately those who are in life sentences are going to be young black males. Well, not young necessarily anymore if they're life sentences, but um, and now they're being offered, okay, we're going to keep you in this cage for the rest of your life, or here you can kill yourself, and that leads to riots on the streets and outrage in the public.
mm,
Would that outrage cause you to change your mind, or is that seen as like, no, they're behaving irrationally, we're going to handle these completely in a contained way?
um, I don't think the outrage would change my mind unless the outrage would have to also change my mind if it was something like letting the person do it themselves. If somebody is in jail for life and they don't want to live, and you slid a knife into the cell,
Mm-hmm.
and they truly like that's how bad they didn't want to live. They took it and they ended their own life. Um, I would have to view that the same, and I don't see a moral issue happening. Things exist. Now we can look at like the why reasons why we shouldn't do this, but knives exist, and one existing for a person that could use it. Somebody can create their own tools. They could they could be out in nature and take rocks and smash them together until they form a man-made knife, and then kill themselves. So the only outrage that I would think would be reasonable from people rioting would be if there is reason to think that people are being killed for their race or for whatever that aren't choosing to do it. Somebody's getting an injection. They're the we're seeing the stats, and it's like 90% of the people getting assisted suicide are black, and then people are like, no, clearly this isn't like there's racist prison guards killing innocent people, so we're fighting. But if the rioters truly knew for sure that all the people that were in prison that were getting assisted suicide, that they wanted it and there wasn't some corruption going on, I wouldn't be affected by the rioters. No.
Well, if there is any sort of injustice at all in the justice system, if there is any racism in the justice system, then isn't it therefore simply the case that this is going to be a sort of racially charged issue where, yeah, you have young black males being sent to prison, and now they're like, oh, you can kill yourself. And it doesn't have to be in the process of the
Mm.
actual selection of the person deciding to kill themselves. The racism, the injustice can be downriver, right, or rather upstream.
Mm.
Um,
Okay, so assuming that that a percentage at all whatsoever of let's just stick with the black thing of black people in prison are falsely put in prison, like let's say they're innocent, they did nothing wrong, and they're put in prison for racist reasons, but because they're in prison and they feel like they don't have any other options, they would truly say, I will accept the suicide,
yeah.
and therefore, okay, yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't just have to be race either. I think that's the general objection. In and even if the person is guilty, actually, I think I don't know if you wouldn't feel this way, but like so many people are like, you can't ask someone in that circumstance like whether or not they want to end it, you know, because it's sort of like it's not fair because they are miserable and in prison. And I'm not even saying that that's my position, but I'm saying that society would be so outraged that this would be their reaction, and they would be. I think society would be inconsolable on this. I believe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna make a note. I need to think that over. Yeah. Um, and then if that's true, um, can we compare situations of people not in prison to that situation, like what they're going through in life? Is it comparable to a prisoner being in a situation in life? Is a situation that can be overcome, that's a mental situation of depression or something, out of prison, is that comparable to a person being locked up, and in both cases they feel life's not worth it and want to end it,
Mhm.
and therefore we're like not intentionally taking advantage of their situation. Um, yeah, that's interesting. Um, there was something. What was it? How to prevent killing? Government doctor. Okay, so oh, that's what I was going to ask you. So you said the terminal illness. Do you think are there any cases that aren't terminal that you would see an exception for? Somebody being in a situation that they just absolutely despise, like quadriplegic.
I was about to say
Uh,
quadriplegic now.
yeah, somebody being blind. Now, a lot of people live great lives blind, but if somebody absolutely does not want to live in this world blind, they declare, I'm fully blind now. I don't want to live in this life. I can't figure out how to adapt to it. And then they're told you have to spend a couple years trying to figure out how to adapt to it, see therapists, all this stuff, and then they do all the things, and then enough time goes by, and they just cannot adapt to it. And they choose like I love life, but as a blind person, there is no way, and I've experienced it for 2-3 years. I cannot figure out how to enjoy my life. And then same with quadriplegic. It's like there are plenty that can have great lives, but after experiencing it for a certain amount of time, seeing a therapist, having their loved ones around, they still. And I think the interesting thing with these two cases and maybe others is the thing making them not want to live is irreversible. Now they're feeling the thing that's irreversible, that's making them feel a certain way. Those feelings could be reversible, so we have to keep that in mind.
Hmm.
The quadriplegic will
Yeah,
never walk again. The blind person will never see again. But yeah.
couple of pins. Um, let's say in a world where the quadriplegic will never walk again and the blind person never see again, because I'm actually not convinced we're any longer living in that world. I think we might now be living in a world where quadriplegics might walk again and we're
I thought
blind.
of that as I said it. Yeah.
Yeah, the blind might see again. But hypothetically, and when I said quadriplegic, for anyone watching, I'm not saying that you can't live or that the person who you know is quadriplegic, the person you've heard of is quadriplegic, that they can't live an entirely fulfilling life. You can live a social and cerebral life and find a way to exercise and all of these things while being quadriplegic. It's just that immediately draws to mind someone who's helpless, who's lost all four of their limbs or never had them, or someone who is at the same time blind, whatever their sort of the permanency of their situation. Ooh, let me
Mm-hmm.
hang up on that. Okay, whatever the permanency of their situation is, um, you know that's what's important. It's that we're dealing with a permanent situation. Sorry, I got a phone call.
Oh, you're good.
Um, where they're the state that they're in is not changeable and it's miserable, and it would make sense that someone would not want to live through that misery and would rather not exist at all. Yes, there are cases like that. That makes sense. It doesn't have to be actual terminal. So like there are, diseases where you're in excruciating pain all the time and there's no end to that excruciating pain. So yes, there are situations where rational people would be willing to say, okay, I can't live like this anymore. There's no prospects of change. So yes.
Gotcha. Um, yeah, no, that's definitely a complicated one. I know for myself, I wouldn't. Well, I can't know what I would feel in a situation, but I am the type of person from how I feel that if I were quadriplegic, I would not want to live. And I'm pretty sure if I were blind, I would not want to live. Part of that might have to do with my, I don't know if crippling is the right word, but nearly crippling claustrophobia.
Mm.
And claustrophobia is not even the right word, but not having control. I don't like if I'm in a building that's a certain amount of stories up, knowing that if I wanted to be to a certain place and I can't, like there's an internal panic.
Can I
It's
interrupt
why,
you real quick?
yeah, go for it.
I've sometimes have heard you talk about, what if someone insists they don't want to be hugged or they don't want to be touched, um, and sort of like the concern that you've had with that has like struck me as like unusual, and I understand that that's part of the point. It's like you're just that because touch is something that's so common and yet also so personal to an individual that maybe it's something worth talking about because it's an area of friction that often comes up. And I was curious, do you think that's related, like claustrophobia? And do you have an
Mm.
issue like if somebody just comes up and hugs you?
Yeah, no. It's not. It's not connected at all. I love hugs. I'm a huggy person. I know people that aren't, but I think touch is one of the best things, and I also am a very relaxed person. So even though I think people shouldn't touch people unwanted, if a random stranger like was just the type of person that would put their hand on your shoulder, or
Mm-hmm.
when you're introduced to somebody, they do the French like come in close and like kiss near your cheek or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I am such an easygoing person. I wouldn't care about any of that kind of stuff. No, it's definitely more. It's about control. Like I feel like I would fear. Like I hate being in planes. I would rather be on a boat. I'm
Mm-hmm.
more likely to survive in a plane than on a boat, and there's no way I could swim across the ocean. But knowing I have the control to swim across the ocean, like
Mm-hmm.
to have the option, where I don't have an option falling from the sky, it's more of that type of thing. The touch is just me bringing to an extreme that I think people should have freedom from actions unwanted by others. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just as simple as if somebody taps somebody on the shoulder and the person said, "Oh, I don't want you to do that. Please don't tap me again." And they're like, I can do it for fun. I'm not going to get in trouble. And then they keep tapping. I think if that was caught on camera, that person should get some kind of trouble that is declaring that this is illegal to do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not connected to
Do
that
you
stuff.
think that there is implied content because of culture? There's implied content that I can tap on someone's shoulder to get their attention. But then if they make it clear that they don't like that, that's different.
Correct. Yes. Because there's so many things that you can do that if you're not sure, like if somebody's about to get hit by a car and you push them out of the way, you're saving their life.
Mm-hmm.
If before you did it they said don't push me and then they got hit, then that's fine or whatever. But yeah, I think there's so many situations where somebody might touch somebody else
Mm-hmm.
not knowing if they would want it or not. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like the tap on the shoulder thing. Now, I think we should be cautious. I think as I go through life and learn more and discover what other people's feelings are like, I might tap somebody like you on the shoulder and say, "Oh, hey, do you know which way to go for this thing?"
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't tap a petite woman on the shoulder where she'd turn around and see a man that's bigger and stronger than her and be scared. So we need to be cautious about what we're doing. But I think somebody that doesn't think that through, somebody the size of the Rock that taps a petite woman on the shoulder to ask her a question, I don't care how scared she is, his action shouldn't be thought of as illegal.
Yes, I agree on all counts and every nuance that you just stated. One way in which this sort of implied consent issue comes up is a lot of people seem to be under the impression that like if you don't want someone on your property and they're trespassing, that's like this horrendous crime and that it's illegal. But people have a right actually to walk up to your door and ring the doorbell or knock on the door, and only then after you tell them, no, I don't want you here, you're trespassing, then they have to leave, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's the doorbell is there for a reason. Someone can come up and propose to you, oh, have you ever heard of are you saved? Have you heard of the good word of Jesus Christ? They can walk up and say whatever they want. They can walk up and make their pitch. Um, because that's what a walk is there for. That's what the doorbell is there for. If you decide to install a fence out there, right, so that now they have to like knock on the fence that's not even attached to the door,
Mm-hmm.
then okay, that's fine. But because you've signaled that people aren't allowed to just come up to your door and knock at it, because otherwise they are, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and things can be normalized in a society, and not everybody agrees to those, but because they're normalized, I think we, in a sense, have to accept their possibility. Like if somebody, in the past like 20 years, there's been a lot of talk about consent, which consent in almost all cases is good, depending, like whatever situation you're talking about. But if somebody goes on a date with somebody, if somebody goes up to somebody and says, "Hey, do you want to go on a date with me?" and they say yes, it's thought of as pretty normal to, like, if you're watching a movie, especially for younger kids. But I've never been an adult that was single that was going on dates because I'm married. But if somebody's on a date and they're watching a movie, they might like get the courage to reach over and hold the person's hand or put their hand on their knee.
Mhm.
Um, Now, you should never sexually hold a random stranger's hand that you've never talked to on the street and go up and hold their hand. But the idea that a person has to say to the person, "Can I reach over and hold your hand?" Or
Mhm.
even something like a kiss. You go on a date and then you've never kissed this person. They've never said you could kiss them, but you're saying goodnight to them. You're at their doorstep and you kiss, you give them a kiss goodnight or something like that. Now they could tell you, I'm not interested in you. I don't want to be kissed. But the fact that you kissed them, I don't think you did a horrible thing, without asking. But it is an interesting line, like figuring out what is acceptable to do because the norms, and at what point can you decide, like, do you agree with the kiss one? Like, if somebody goes in to kiss somebody, if you could back up and say no, but if you don't back up and the kiss happens to land, do you think in any way the person did something wrong, by not asking?
Um, it is entirely culturally dependent. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what that culture is right now. I know that when I was young and dating, it seemed pretty normal to go either way, way before way before the Me Too movement, way before more and more of this sort of like awakening of an understanding. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed pretty normal to ask if I could kiss a woman. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, it didn't it didn't break any sort of a tension. There was so much tension in the air anyway. You could say, like, you would look right at her eyes, make eye contact, and say, "Can I kiss you?" And as you did, you put your hand on her chin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that seemed totally natural and normal. So I don't think it didn't seem burdensome to me to
Yeah.
ask for permission. On other cases, you are clicking so well, and I think this is what people are getting to. You're clicking so well that it could be jarring maybe to ask for permission. It's better just to lean in.
Mm-hmm.
I feel bad for people who really lack social cues. They tend to seem to build up like a resentment generally against society and against the opposite sex, whether or not they're women or men. So many
Mm-hmm.
people just are so confused by the opposite sex and by other people's expectations that they build up all this resentment that's sad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I feel like if you are a type of person that lacks, recognizing the social cues, once you're aware of that, it makes sense to tell people, like, that you're on a date with. You say, "Hey, by the way, because of this reason, I might ask you, if I can hold your hand instead of just holding it or whatever." And so, yeah, I think people should be aware, and people should also be aware of other people's faults, and the best they can, not judge them. Kind of like I was saying, if a stranger came up to me and kind of tapped me on the shoulder, I even if I didn't like it and I felt off by it, I can recognize that that person probably didn't intentionally do anything wrong. But yeah, the thing I wanted to point out, in case anybody listening thought I was saying because of social norms, actions that might be perceived as bad. I'm not claiming that they're acceptable. Like, I think it's fine to, if you're on a date with somebody and you feel like you're clicking, to lean in for a kiss. Maybe don't rocket it in. Lean in a way where if they want it, they'll stay there, and if they don't, they'll back up. But
Mhm.
I think it's acceptable to lean into for a kiss. I think it's acceptable to tap a stranger on the shoulder. But if in our society a shoulder was like this valued thing that you don't touch, I'm not saying that because there, in a sense, there's no difference between tapping somebody on the shoulder to ask them a question or tapping a woman on her breast to ask her a question. You're tapping a person. So you have to connect societal norms with your actions.
Mhm.
Um, because which is why it's important to specify once they're unwanted. That's where there's a huge issue. But when it's unknown, I just have to accept that societal norms. You can't have a rule against societal norms when everybody around you is doing it.
Mhm.
Everybody around you is tapping people on the shoulder, so you accept that thing. Um,
One of the things we have to sort of let society know philosophically that they have to understand um, is that you just said it. You said, "Oh, if it's unwanted, it's what's important is when you judge the actions of someone else who's addressing you, who's touching you, who's asking you for your number. Is it reasonable for someone to think that this might be wanted? You know, so yeah, it might be the case that if somebody's asking for your number, that you might say yes, and that's fine. And it's weird when people react super negatively to that sort of thing, or the tapping on
mhm.
the shoulder, reacting super negatively to that sort of thing. You hit on the note exactly where it is, which is like if someone is a young petite woman, someone who's me, who's like some 6'3", 300-pound guy coming up, tapping around the shoulder. You can't do that. There are lots of cases where actually I've just been going about my day walking at a store and I realize that like some random woman in front of me keeps glancing back like I'm following her. She looks like afraid, you know. It's like
Mhm.
I remember I was on a trip with my father um many years ago to Maine on a train, and I was with his assistant, his like legal assistant, and they we were walking, and at one point we were like, "Oh, that's as far as we're going to walk. We're going to turn around." And they both hesitated, and they just stood there and sort of looked at each other and waited. And I realized what had changed was there was a young, pretty woman who crossed the street right, just behind us before we started to turn around and walked that other way, the way that we were about to go.
Mhm.
And they realized, because I was off in I was just daydreaming, and they realized they have to give her a long head start so that she
Mhm.
doesn't feel as if they turned around, if the three of us turned around and started following her as soon as she got behind us. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, and that's
So
good. And I feel like that. I don't know when I discovered that. It was hearing a woman talk about that issue because I think there is, even though I think there's a lot of bad that came out of the Me Too movement, I think there's a lot of good. And
mhm,
discovering what somebody might feel, especially on average, based on gender, race, all these different things,
mhm,
and trying to I would never want to scare a person.
mhm,
So I think that's a good action to do. I was discussing it might have been with my wife or somebody else about the whole thing about how people open doors for people and a lot of people don't like that. Um, I think subconsciously part of why maybe people do, or at least why men open doors for women, and part of why I do, is it's almost like a signal saying you don't have to be afraid of me. I want to show you a nice action because I know that women can be afraid in alleyways or in different places. And so if you're witnessing this nice action, you can go, "Oh, that's a nice guy." Now it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that a bad person that would do a bad action wouldn't open the door and cheat the system. But
Mhm.
it's anyways. It's just an idea that popped in my head that it's almost like a signaling, like I'm with you. I side with you. Don't be afraid of me. Here's me not pressuring you into anything. I'm opening this door and letting you take care of your business first.
Yes, and not only that, but I would extend that explanation to almost all courtesy, right? Almost all
Mm-hmm.
courtesy. What you're signaling is I'm not defecting, right? I am not a dangerous person. I'm not an angry or enraged person right now. I'm not making my problems your problems. And it's
Mm-hmm.
also the case just with Americans. We tend to smile at each other a lot compared to other people, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
smile in a certain way where we're intentionally signaling this isn't a real smile. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't a real smile. I'm just saying, oh, I'm passing by, I'm saying hello. I'm letting you know that I'm not some person who's freaking out, I'm just normal. That's all we're signaling. Here, I'm a normal person. You can be comfortable around me. That's what sort of
Mm-hmm.
all these courtesies signal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Okay, I really like that topic, and there's a lot of different routes we can go into with it, and we should at some point. But really quick before we hop off here, because I do have to hop off here in a sec. I wanted to scroll back to one of the first comments that came on here by Louis Ghetto. Um, there's kind of three that run together, but it was one of the first things we talked about. But he says appeals to normal rational is a fallacy. He says just because something is normalized and rational doesn't necessarily make it good or right or not right. Um, so I was curious what your thoughts were, because we were talking about if somebody wanted to die
Mhm.
and we needed to make sure they were thinking rationally. I guess
Uh-huh.
his claim is, and this is like the idea of people having total liberty over the idea of if they die or not. Um, that there's he's I think he's claiming that it's not necessarily good to be thinking rational. What are your thoughts on that?
It's flatly wrong to say that that's a fallacy, right? He's free
Okay.
to look it up. It doesn't exist. There is no fallacy of like, oh, appealing to what's rational is a fallacy. It's not a fallacy. That's a goal that you either can or cannot decide to pursue. It someone right. So there's you can decide to care about that, or you can decide to not care about that.
Hmm.
Right.
Could maybe the fallacy be that we can't pinpoint what rational is? Like we know what we view as rational, but what if a group of 10 irrational people were telling somebody that was what me and you might consider rational that they are being irrational? Is there a way, even though we can know what rational means to us, dictionary definition, is there a way to describe, like factually, objectively, if somebody is thinking rationally?
Um. Oh
I
well,
don't think you'd
first
make
you'd
it a
have to
fallacy, but
know.
do you think maybe that's why he's calling it a fallacy, because it's not a official argument? Maybe.
Well, if what we're saying is there's no such thing as objective value, if that's what we're starting to narrow in on, then yes, if you're coming to that, so you have to have some some sort of prior assumptions about what you do or do not care about. And
Mm,
so once you're pursuing those goals, then we can decide whether or not the actions you're taking in pursuit of those goals are rational or not. So
mm.
it can't exist out. So rationality can't exist outside of context. Is am I addressing his what you're
Yeah.
getting at?
No, I think you are. I'm just trying to, when I hear things, I try to break them down. And I don't, I agree with you. I don't know how I would phrase it. So I'm going to ask you, if somebody came up to you and said, I want to be assisted with suicide, um, what would you ask them And what would their answers be that would let you know that they are being rational or irrational?
Oh, okay. So if someone says, I want to be assisted to kill myself, and
Hmm.
then I explore why they want to kill themselves, I'm asking them questions, and I'm
Yeah.
assessing whether or not I consider it to be rational.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Couldn't put myself in the position of a professional, but I don't want to dodge the question.
Right, and that's
Um,
what. Yeah, we're not psychiatrists, and so I don't expect you to have an answer in the same way that I don't have an answer. But yeah, if you were just off the top of your head, let's say nobody ever thought of this, and we lived in a world where this was never even thought of, and you just happen to have interest in the idea of rationality. What would make you think that if this person was thinking differently in a changeable way,
mhm.
they would answer this differently?
Okay, so in that case, I would want to make sure that, like, so rationality, if let's say someone is convinced that just like life is horrible, they're in every way they think life is horrible. They think that people who are enjoying life are enjoying it because they are delusional. They are an anti-natalist. They don't think other people should exist because life is horrible. They want to
Mhm.
end their own existence because it's all pain. That's what they believe, and while they're making these declarations, um, in the meantime, you actually are able to determine, I think they just have a vitamin deficiency. And so then you like inject them with
Mhm.
the vitamins, and that helps their hormones change, and they're all like, you know what, I feel better. I actually enjoy life. I think this food smells and tastes delicious. I want to go for a run. I met this beautiful woman or this handsome man, and their whole life changes because they had a vitamin deficiency. But in
Mhm.
essence, though, that's sort of the way everything is. It just depends on whether or not the problem is changeable. To what extent do we
Yeah.
have the ability, the technology to change what the problem is?
Yeah. Well, and especially if we were to change it, they would be grateful.
Hmm.
Um, the because yeah, one thing that's interesting. I don't know if it's directly connected to being rational, but it's we animals have an instinct of sorts to stay alive. The ones that have evolved to continue only have done so because they try to stay alive and procreate. And so to have this be part of what we are, part of what makes a species, like if half the humans and half of any species wanted to not live, we would witness this thing happening where we don't. It's not a normal thing because that species wouldn't have continued if they wanted that. So witnessing somebody even want to die means something's off. So then, yeah, the question just becomes, is it off because of something changeable like the vitamin thing, or is it off because nothing in life could make this brain that developed this way with these thoughts change? And so my first thought process goes to like the idea of somebody that's like schizophrenic or something like that. I don't know much about these things, but somebody where their brain, the way they were born, nothing led to this. They were just born with a brain that developed in a way where they see things that aren't there. People are talking to them that aren't there because of it. They think the government's putting chips in their brain and all these kind of things, and they don't want to live like this. I would feel like if you couldn't fix it with a vitamin, you couldn't fix it with any natural treatments, then you come down to the idea: is there a medicine that could fix it, or in a hypothetical future crazy technology world, could we open up the brain, go there it is, move that around, and then they're good?
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know if it's just on us to go to figure out the best ideas we can to fix a thing, and then if we cannot, if a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old, somebody that's not terminally ill, they want to die and they have all those things I just described that are somewhat like schizophrenia. Um, what level of inability to fix it let us go, all right, this is a candidate for this situation?
Um,
And is that an inability to think rationally, or are they thinking rationally because it's the best they can do with what they have?
Well, if we're sort of crafting it to say, okay, here's a situation where their life is terrible and horrible. This is sort of like the always in pain, blind, deaf, quadriplegic thing. Um, if from their perspective, they are living a horrible and painful life, and there's no way to get them to change that condition or to change that condition for them, then yeah, it makes sense. But that's sort of like one elegant way you put it is there a way to change the conditions such that once they change, they would feel grateful to society for having not allowed them to kill themselves at the time and to wait for the the hormone imbalance to change, to wait for the life circumstances to change, the
Mm-hmm.
health circumstances to change, just the psychological outlook to change. Then yes, but that's sort of like once we're confronted with the real life, the way this is in real life, it's never that perfect. It's never that laboratory perfect.
Yeah.
So in theory, like I agree with you, but those are extreme circumstances that almost never come up. It's really just I I see so many people who are just miserable, and there's suicide in their family history that puts them at risk for it, and they there's no reason for them to really be killing themselves, but
Mm-hmm.
they have they're a risk for it, and it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
But let
Oh
me
man.
let me let me address that one guy because I don't want to straw man him, the one who said it's a fallacy. There is such a thing as a naturalistic fallacy, or it's just sort of an appeal to the norm. We're saying, oh, this is good because it's normal, right? But if you're if you're drawing simply that, if you're flatly declaring this is good because it's normal, then yeah, you're not thinking critically at all, right? You're simply accepting everything as it is to be normal, and I would not do that. I'm not. I'm
Mm-hmm.
suggesting that we actually do care about the norms of society because of the consequences when we break those norms, right? We're dealing with society as it is. And that's not the normative. That's not appeal to just what's normal or the naturalistic fallacy, which are
Gotcha.
two different things, but I'm not sure which one he's actually saying.
Yeah. Well, Dillian here in the comments wrote bandwagon fallacy. I don't know if that's a technical term for that, but I don't know if he's saying that you're doing that. He's just describing what you're calling the normal.
He might be. Like there's a list of formal fallacies that are real fallacies, and then there's like this club of like made up fallacies that actually are not fallacies. Like there's one for like if you appeal to claiming that something is like Hitler, that's a fallacy, right?
Yeah.
And they're
Well,
there's all these fallacies that are not fallacies. They don't exist, and people tell each other that these fallacies exist and they don't. If you look up all any of these guys who are talking about fallacies have to do is Google formal fallacies, right?
mm-hmm.
The problem is fallacy is not a legally protected term. So I can invent a fallacy if I want.
Mm-hmm.
It's formal fallacies that are actually fallacies.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, Dillian said that he was describing what you were explaining, so he wasn't saying that you were
Oh,
doing the
okay.
fallacy. He was basically breaking down what Lewis, I think, was trying to say earlier. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I prefer not to call out fallacies because I rather people describe what they mean. Every once in a while, I'll tell somebody that they strawman me
Mhm.
because it just seems like the quickest way to get in there with that. But usually anything that you could just refer to like you're saying why you're telling somebody that they are committing a fallacy with their argument.
Mhm.
I think 9 times out of 10, more than 9 times out of 10, uh, it's better to describe why you think they did it, because telling them, it's almost as if it's an insult. And usually if it's going to be rightfully brought up, it's because the person you're talking with doesn't talk about these kind of topics that much.
Mhm.
And so it's somebody not realizing that they're committing a fallacy. But
Yeah.
if two intelligent people are talking about topics like this, then the idea of telling them that they committed a fallacy it almost just comes across as an insult. And I prefer to have each person just break down their argument and like why do you think this is reasonable, and maybe compare it to something that's more extreme.
I do want to say though that I take pride in my ability to just change my mind on a dime if I'm wrong. And
Hmm.
so it's important if I do commit a formal fallacy, right? So like an ad hominem fallacy. If
Hmm.
I ever claim that someone is right or wrong simply because of who they are as opposed to their argument,
Hmm.
um, then that's an ad hominem fallacy. Now there are things that are similar to that. Like an appeal to authority is not necessarily ad hominem, right? So like
Hmm.
I could say, I listen, I'm just not going to listen to you on this because of who you are. That's not ad hominem, um, because I'm saying I'm just not even going to actually trust your argument because I'm just not going to trust your argument. It's not saying your
Yeah.
argument is wrong because of who you are. It's saying I'm not going to trust your argument because of who you are. Or there's
Hmm.
like a lot of people think it's an ad hominem to insult someone, like you're wrong and you're a jackass. That's not an ad hominem. Like it has to be like you are.
Really?
Yeah, you are. An ad hominem is saying like you're wrong because of who you are. So, for example, your argument is it shouldn't be listened to because you are like, let's say what the taxes should be. Like if you're in a low tax bracket, nobody should listen to you because you're motivated to have this opinion. If you're in a high
Mm.
tax bracket, nobody should listen to you because you're motivated to have this opinion. And it works that way with gender, with race, with anything. If you draw attention to someone, their identity, and say that invalidates their argument, that's at
Is ad hominem? Is it always the same? Is there an ad hominem fallacy and then ad hominem attack? Because I feel like when
yeah,
I
it
usually
could be an
hear it
attack. You're right.
said, when I hear people say it, they're just pointing out that there's two people talking about a topic, and then somebody's insulting them, and then that's usually said it's pointing out it's bad that you're going to an attack when you could just be talking to me about the topic. It doesn't seem like they're usually saying your argument's bad because
Mhm.
of the attack you're doing, but they could be that could just be a popular thing that's inaccurate. Maybe ad hominem is only when it's a true fallacy. Because I wouldn't think it's a fallacy. It's a fallacy to call somebody a jackass, but there's this famous one where this guy, I can't remember his name. Anyways, he did this debate with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson, he called Jordan Peterson something like an old white man or something like that, and I think that was referred to as an ad hominem attack. But it didn't. It wasn't like a fallacy because it wasn't. He wasn't saying your argument's wrong because you're white or whatever. He was just calling him this thing, and I think it's fair to point out that if you have a good argument, you wouldn't be throwing insults, but it doesn't mean it's a fallacy. So I don't know. I might have to look into it further.
Yeah, well, the problem is that like there's a thin line there because if he's saying, "What do you know? You don't have the lived experience of being, a person of color. You're just an old white man."
Mm-hmm.
That is a fallacy, right? That is ad hominem.
Mm,
But if he's just saying, "Screw you, old white man," that's not an ad hominem, right? Now,
gotcha.
it
Okay.
might be an ad hominem attack, but do we really just go around speaking Latin like that randomly? Like
Yeah, I guess not. I think that
it.
must be a thing where somebody heard somebody referring to fallacies, and then they thought it was cool or whatever, and then they started doing it.
Mhm.
So yeah, interesting. Um, yeah, yeah. But yes, I enjoy learning the different fallacies and whatnot. The amount of times I got told that I was doing or somebody else was doing a reductio without me knowing what that meant, and then eventually I'm like, I gotta look this up, and I'm like,
For
oh, okay, that's
reductio
fun.
ad absurdum.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess these things it's interesting because when I hear something, my brain just naturally breaks down why this argument's bad. Somebody having the argument that because if somebody is forced to not have an abortion, but they can't afford to take care of their kid or whatever, I instantly think of how bad that argument is and all the details of why it's bad. But I don't have a notebook full of why to call it a certain fallacy. I can just describe this is why it's bad. And I think almost everything that has a fallacy, it's almost as if the best thing to do instead of calling out the fallacy is create a reductio for every bad argument instead of pointing out any type of of fallacy. Especially because if they committed the fallacy, they likely again don't have conversations on the topic much and haven't really thought it through. So if you show the reductio, they're going to either accept it or they're going to say that's ridiculous, and then they're probably not worth talking to. So
Well, I don't want to create any problems for you, so I won't mention like exactly what it was, but you sent a video to me previously that when
mhm.
you said, "Oh, this happens when people don't talk about ideas very often." You sent a video, and I listened to these guys make a point. I won't. I'm
You
not
can
trying
say
to
whatever. I know what you're
insult
talking
anyone.
about, and you're fine.
And they were criticizing you though, and he was sort of laughing and saying, why are people obsessed with, sentience? Like that's only one aspect of what makes an animal and why we care about animals, why people care about sentience. And then
Hmm.
later he defined an animal, same guy defined an animal um as a being that has an experience,
Hmm.
and I was like, well, does he talk about this stuff very often? I mean, because he just did a loop de loop. Like that's what we're talking about when we talk about sentience, is a being that has an
Hmm.
experience. And he's saying if that's really what he cares about. And it was the same guy who um, mocked you for pointing out that essentially bivalves are like vegetables made of meat, and he's like, oh, do you same with snails, right? No, the shell is not what makes the difference, you
Hmm.
know? Like it was, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's interesting, and a lot of people don't want to talk about these topics. A lot of people say, "Oh, if we're caring about this certain thing, the more we philosophize about it, the more it breaks it down and makes it not matter." And that's not true. If you breaking something down just makes you understand it further, and then makes you go a different direction, then that's a good thing. I think that's always a good thing. Knowing more is always good.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I'm
I
actually
agree.
talking to those guys on Thursday. I'm very
That's
curious
what I
to see
mean.
how
I
that
don't want to like
conversation goes.
corrupt. I don't want to sit here and talk smack about somebody who you're trying to, to
Oh,
reach.
yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that then. But no, but I think it's totally fine. I don't think you're being insulting at all. And I think it's yeah, just pointing something out. But yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, I do got to hop off here. I got to go take care of a thing or two, and then I got another talk in about a half hour.
All right.
But it was great talking to you. Let's set this up again soon and make it a regular thing.
Absolutely. I'd love to be on again.
All right, take care, man.
All right. Bye bye.